Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics live on Trust TV, your go-to destination for everything politics, policy, and governance. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you most kindly for joining us. Let's dive into a critical issue tonight, as one that is raising serious concerns about press freedom in Nigeria. In just the past 21 days, we've seen a disturbing pattern of high-profile arrests and police investigations, as well as invitations, I beg your pardon, for journalists across the country. On August 5, microblogger and leak journalist Isaac Bristol, popularly known as Pidom Nigeria, was arrested by a group of about 15 policemen who broke into his hotel room in Port Harcourt, River State, and transported him to the Force Criminal Investigation Department in the Federal Capital Territory. Other journalists have also faced similar fates. Fisal Soyombo, founder and editor-in-chief of the Foundation for Investigative Journalism, was detained for 8 hours after voluntarily reporting to the Nigeria Police Force National Cybercrime Center in Abuja on August 14. His alleged crime? Exposing corruption within the government. These arrests don't stop there. Freelancer Abdurrashid Hamad and journalists Adejuwon Soyinka have been both targets of harassment, raising the question, is this the new normal under the current administration? Tonight, we're joined by Tobi Soniyi. He's a legal advisor to the International Press Institute, and Segun Olatunji, a former editor of First News, who was held incommunicado for 14 days by the military of the country, will be joining us much later in the conversation to further add value to this interaction. Now, of course, help us to unpack the alarming trend of journalist crackdowns and what it means for press freedom in the most populous black nation in the world. So let's start things off with Mr. Tobi, who's joined us virtually via Zoom. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on Daily Politics. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Let's start this way. How important is this conversation in your view?
Yeah, it's very, very important in my view because I remember vividly, I was there during the military junta. I was working with the Daily Times then, and it was a struggle. We all believed then that when we have democracy, journalists will have some peace. Now that we have democracy, we're not having that peace. So obviously, it's a source of concern. It's an issue that we need to be addressed. I mean, all of us must begin to wonder the democracy that we all fought for, hoping that it will allow us to practice our trade as journalism, is now the one that we are now being haunted. So we are no longer in the military, but attack on journalists have not stopped. So it's a very relevant conversation. It's an issue that we need to discuss now.
Right. And of course, this is a global phenomenon because across the world, there are several trends that have continued to emerge, showcasing different approaches, different attacks on the profession, on professionals, a way to gag, so to say, the people who have been saddled with this ethical responsibility to keep the people informed, to expose corruption, and to spotlight certain critical issues in society. What is peculiar about using the instrumentality of the government, i.e. the intelligence community or the instrument of force, to perhaps rein in certain journalists who, according to some of these security agencies, are crossing over certain lines?
Yeah, it's very important that we look at how government functions, because I've said it time without number, is a misconception on the part of the security agency. They sometimes think that they had a bigger role to play than us. No, it's not. That is not the case. All of us derive our duty from the Constitution. So the security has its role to play. The journalists have their role to play. We are all working under the Constitution, and therefore, it's a misconception of the powers of the security agency to think that part of their job is to begin to arrest and hunting journalists. You know, there are there are provisions in the law that are there to settle scores. If, for instance, a journalist publish a story somebody does not feel comfortable with, the law of libel is there. Let the person go and sue and recover from the journalist instead of police or intelligence agencies to start inviting the journalists, putting them behind bars, putting them behind counters. That means it's just like using their own power to stop freedom of expression, which is a constitutionally guaranteed right. So we understand that there are rights and there are conflicting rights, and that where my rights begin, somebody else on stop. But there are provisions within the law. We are in a civil society. Whoever feel aggrieved, you don't need to call the police, you don't need to call the army. Go to court and say, look, you defame me, you rubbish me, and therefore you must apologize, you must do this, you must pay me this. But they will just not allow those laws to operate. So it's like, for me, the intelligence community tried to overreach the Constitution by suppressing freedom of expression. And we are not going to give anything to that. We are going to keep pushing until they realize that just like they have to do their job, journalists too have to do their job.
Yeah, and in talking about that, over the past 72 hours, there's been a change of guard in the two topmost intelligence agencies in the country, the Department of State Services as well as the National Intelligence Agency, are, quote, CIA and FBI, as the case may be in the United States. One overseeing our intelligence community on the international scene, the other one dealing with domestic developments. And that these agencies, especially the DSS, for instance, has become sort of like, has built this notorious reputation, so to say, within the journalism community for arresting journalists who are either looking in the wrong direction, according to some of their complaints, or perhaps going down a path that they're not necessarily comfortable with. Can you talk about some of the common denominators with some of the journalists that especially recently apprehended, or in the past? Is there a common denominator on the kind of work these journalists who are either being invited or arrested or intimidated? What kind of stories are they trying to tell? Has the Institute, for instance, taken a deep dive in looking at why the instrumentality of the state is trying to stop these journalists from doing their job?
Yeah, from my observations, really, most of the time, these security agencies, they have been intervening on the part of civilians, on the part of people that can fight for themselves, people that can complain for themselves. I mean, nobody has said this report threatening national security. No. It's about, okay, I'm investigating a story. I call the people affected by the story. The next thing, they call the police. Even the story has not been published, then the police invite you and asking you, why do you have to call this person to ask such questions? How do we hold people accountable when we cannot call them to seek their reaction to a story? So for most of the stories, they have been fighting for individual, not for the state. But they are always coming up to hide under that national security. Most of the cases, you are investigating corruption somewhere, and then the security agencies are after you. How does that investigation into corruption threaten national security? In fact, the reverse is the case. If you are able to expose the corruption, it's going to strengthen national security. So I've been looking, most of the cases, they hide under the Cybercrime Act, and that is the section 24 they are using talks about putting something on Facebook. They've not come up, they've not even charged anyone to say, okay, the story you are writing violates this and that. Like I said, they were trying to protect people. They are trying to protect big people. They don't want people to be exposed. And that is not their job. They should support journalists in exposing people that are destroying the country, people that are destroying the economy. In fact, if anybody should be supported, it's journalism that should be supported by this security agency so that all of us can have a good country.
Do you think, Barrister Tobi, that it is fair to categorize the influence of political figures, especially who are in government, whether at federal or at state level, overreaching and using these agencies as their own hunt dogs, so to say, pardon the lack of a better expression? Do you think that politicians or political figures in government or with influence are overreaching by using this institution of government to perhaps, protect their own image? And is that why we're seeing a proliferation of some of these attacks on journalists?
Yeah, but between you and I, that has always been the case. That has always been the case. We see policemen, there's following big men, whereas there are security challenge areas that people, we need security. Nobody is there to provide that security, but you see like 10, 15, security operatives running after one person, maybe a local government chairman, for instance. Whereas there are areas that need them, where they need to go and work. So that is an obvious case. Now they are taking it further by now trying to allow the politicians and people with influence to use them against the civil society, against journalism. We should not be. That is why I said it's a misinterpretation of their own role in society. Their role is to maintain security. But by stopping journalists from doing his work, how does that enhance security? And don't forget, I stated earlier that the people they are fighting for, the law of libels all over have made provisions for them, which they can invoke. But they like to see that journalists is locked up. So they deliberately choose that part that, look, once I lock him up, he will not be able to do the story. But that is not the way it works out in the US that you mentioned earlier. Journalists are allowed to do their job. If you are not pleased with it, you can go to court. But here, the security agencies, they play the role of the court, they play the role of the judge. They stop you from writing. They will not even charge you. They just keep you there beyond the 48 hours that is allowed by the law. And, in the process, they tend to weaken your resolve to do the story. If you are not strong, you are likely to chicken out and allow the news subject to get away with whatever atrocity he or she has committed.
If we put this particular issue on a scale, a lot of people watching the program right now, if we look at the data, give me an understanding whether things are getting better or worse. I know the numbers are quite alarming if you zoom out and consider the international data. But what about here in Nigeria? What does the data suggest? Are things getting better? Are we enhancing this relationship? Are we coming to some sort of understanding? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't have a comprehensive data, but since this government came into being 1 year ago, I've seen an unprecedented increase in harassment of journalists. I won't say it's 26, 30 something, but between you and I, my take is that there appear to be a deliberate attempt to, most of the time I've listened to the Minister of Information. I must give it to him. He has intervened and is doing his best himself as a journalist, understand, but he has a problem explaining to security agency that, look, these guys are just doing their job. And then if they are not doing it right, let the person affected, let him go to court. It's not your business to be working for some very influential people to stop them from doing their work. I think, to answer your question, I've seen an increase in harassment of journalists, especially using this Cybercrime Act. The act has always been there, but now they seem to have woken up to the reality that we can use this to attack journalists. Then I also think the government, the Minister of Information, need to educate the security agency that look, this is your hello. Are you there?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead, Barrister. Go ahead. I can hear you.
Yeah, that I mean, intergovernment agency, they need to explain to them. The National Orientation Agency, luckily for us, is headed by journalists. The Minister of Information is a journalist. They need to sit together and say, look, stop giving this government a bad name. Stop fighting on behalf of some people. If anyone is dissatisfied with a story, he has a long line of action that he can take. It's not your business. The Supreme Court has said that, for instance, it's not the business of police to help people recover money. But tomorrow, if you are owing somebody 10 naira, police will come and arrest you and lock you up. The court has said that police is not a debt recovery agency. If somebody said they are owing, go to court and get your order to collect your money. But here, everybody, whether in the police and DSS, they just believe that their job is to work for big men and oppress people that are low, I mean, the ordinary citizen. And that misunderstanding, that flaw, needs to be corrected. Whatever it will take, we need to come hammering in. We need to educate them. We need to let them know that some of these things they are meddling in is none of their business.
Right. And Barrister, if I could just channel what many on the other side have said, is that because of the ownership structure in most media outfits, publishing houses or broadcast houses, because of its private ownership structure where most of the owners are politically exposed persons or political figures, they tend to, motivate some of their workers to carry out what we know as hatchet jobs on their political opponents who may likely be in government, for instance. Would you say that sometimes some of these persons that are either prosecuted or that are being invited to speak to the authorities have the proper motivation with regards to what they're investigating or the story they're working on?
Well, if I get the story correctly, my way of answering it would be that, look, anybody who, if you don't have anything to hide, there is no cause for alarm for you. Even if you're, a publisher or a broadcast media owner want to do a hatchet job, it means that the person that they are doing a hatchet job against will have something to hide. If you don't have anything to hide, no amount of hatchet job will work against you. And then if they cook up a story against you, then, in abroad, they sometimes make you a millionaire. If, for instance, they publish a story that is not true, that give you a chance to, you can ask for 5 billion and ask for 2 billion. It makes you richer. So, like I said, we are in a society, there will always be conflict, there will be different opinion, there will be talks, there will be rumors, there will be reports, there will be falsehoods. But the good thing about the society is that whatever you need to clear your name is there. You don't need the police, you don't need the DSS. You can, all of us, we need if I say you steal and you say you did not steal, we need an arbiter. And that is not the police. It is the court that can judge between you and I who's speaking the truth. So the security agency should allow the court to do their job. They should allow judiciary to do their job. If anybody calls them that the journalist want to ask me a question, you tell him, go and answer the question. If they publish things that are not correct against you, then go to court. You don't need to come and call police to come and arrest the journalist. It's because we are used to this big man mentality that people believe that the police are established for them. Big men believe the policemen, the security are for them. And the security should be for journalists, should be for the person who was libeled, should be for ordinary people. It's not that you just take side with someone and begin to harass people unnecessarily. Our society is not growing because we are not allowing institutions to do their job. The NBC is there, you can complain to them, don't take the law into your hand. Then recently the ombudsman for journalists is there. Even the Segun Olatuji that you mentioned earlier, his case was taken there. So why do you need to send military to Lagos to go? And you can imagine the nation's resources, monetary resources, human resources that was committed into just because they want to arrest one journalist. Maybe if they had sent those teams to Sambisa, they would probably have been able to reduce the insecurity there. But they even flew a plane. I mean, that is a waste. That's a waste.
Yeah. And in talking about this effort to obviously silence the fourth estate of the realm, we've seen so many legislations, for instance, whether it's about regulating social media or perhaps even taking a look at some of those acts that could give the intelligence community a lot more power in terms of investigating some of these matters. Do you think that you know, when it comes to legislation, we have enough protection for journalists right now who are just trying to do their jobs, whether it's by exposing corruption or anything else for that matter, without the fear of this intimidation always lurking in the shadows?
No, we don't have enough law to protect journalists in Nigeria. We don't, and we don't even have an insurance. You can get sacked, you can get kidnapped, you can get punished. You don't get anything. So there are not enough legislation supporting the practice of journalism in Nigeria, and we need to push for that. We need to, for instance, make it mandatory for all employers of journalists to get reporters insured, so that if anything happened to them, they can be compensated. We don't have enough law. I mean, to be very frank with you, we don't. Rather, they are making law that work against journalists. Every law they are thinking of is to protect the big people and to further make the job of a journalist very difficult for him. We have the cybercrime act. They have been talking of social media act. So they are always thinking of one law or the other to further make it difficult for journalists. They are not thinking of any law to make the practice of journalism attractive at all. So where we are today, most laws here are against us, and it is what it is.
Yeah. And would you say that is pointing directly at the quality of our political representation in this country, whether it's at the subnational or the national level? Is this what they want, to silence any voice that seems to be exposing the realities of what is going on within the corridors of power?
Well, I think that is human nature. Whether they are in government, even us as journalists, we have secret. Nobody wants a secret exposed. It's normal all over the world. But it is said that the civic space is not donated to anybody. You have to fight for it. The politicians know how to fight for themselves, but we journalists, we have not learned how to fight for ourselves. We consider too much space to them, and they are using the space to punish us. So it's a battle for the civic space. Journalists, we have to get organized. We have to also introduce legislation and push for it to be passed. But we should not be waiting for politicians to pass law that will favor us. Because if they have their way, they will not want to have journalists around. So if that is the attitude, then you don't expect them to make law that will promote your profession. But we also have to come together, newspaper proprietor of Nigeria, NUJ, everyone. We need to also get a draft bill that will present to National Assembly. We are the ones that lead the campaign for passage of bills. But most of the time, we don't look for how to get our own, anything that will favor us, we allow it to suffer. So maybe this is the time for that to change. We need to also influence legislation, seek amendment to draconian law. We cannot just be waiting and be shouting and be wailing and expect good things to happen. We have to act too.
Right. Just before we wrap things up, Barrister Soniyi, let's talk about the few people you've mentioned who are in government today and are supposedly allies of journalists who are practicing in Nigeria, because we understand they're also journalists, i.e. the Minister of Information, for instance. Are we leveraging, is the journalism community leveraging these kind of relationships to negotiate a better deal? Because there are some journalists who are in exile, self-exile as the case may be, but they believe if they step foot in Nigeria today, they will be hunted by these same agencies that we're talking about right now with regards to their overreach and extrajudicial activities. Do you think there's enough to leverage from the current administration for a safer environment for Nigerian journalists to practice?
Well, there is, at the International Press Institute level, I must confess, we have leveraged on the goodwill of the minister to secure the release of some journalists. He has always been available to help us, but we also understand the constraint. Him alone cannot do it. But at every point that we have called upon him, he has answered us. But it's just like one lonely voice there. So we need the critical mass. Who is in the National Orientation Agency, we can tap into people who we know they will still come back to this our job when they finish with government. We can push them, but like I said, we have to do the job ourselves. We have to, if we want to get commitment from this government, what are we bringing to the table? What are we asking them for? We don't have a draft bill. We are not even pushing for any amendment to cybercrime act. We just left things as they are. And you know, sometimes they say you can't cry more than the bereaved. If we, the journalists, are not crying, we are not seeking the help, we are not tapping into our connection to the minister, you don't expect the minister to help us. So we need to call ourselves together, come together and look at where things are getting bad for us and say, look, we have this man and he has the ear of the president. How can we take advantage of him? What can we push through him? That is the way the civic space works all over the world. I mean, it's not donated a la carte. You have to fight for it. But we are not fighting for anything. We are just waiting for them to either favor us or to deal with us. So we need to get organized. We need to. That's what NUJ should be doing, guild of editors and whatever. Instead of going around, I mean, we need to come together and then see what can we do to make the practice of journalism better, the practice of journalism, so that we can, if we say, okay, can we say, okay, we take this bill that they refuse to pass it. We will seek for this amendment, they refuse to amend. But we can't say that now because we have not even done any preliminary investigation. It's just lamentation. Right. We have to move from lamentation to action. Yeah. Because politicians, they fight for themselves.
We're going to have
the judges, they fight for themselves. Lawyers, they fight for themselves.
Soniyi is the legal advisor of the International Press Institute, speaking to us on the current state of affairs, especially regarding press freedom in Nigeria. I'm afraid we're going to have to end it here for now, Barrister Tobi. But thank you most kindly for joining us on Daily Politics tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless you.
Great conversation. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to double down because we get to speak to the former editor of First News Nigeria. And he's, of course, someone who has quite the experience regarding the issue at hand. He will be telling us about his experiences while we also double down on some of the prevailing issues within the polity, especially as it relates to press freedom in Nigeria. That conversation is coming up next. Stay with us.